So that's the most recent history of Israel, the fighting or the protests that are taking place over the judicial reforms. But that's only part of it. Remember, the bigger stories that I'm going to be talking to you about in a short while still continue. Terrorism, what's happening with the settlements, what's happening with the Palestinians, what's happening with the Oslo Accords and the Abraham Accords, and is there going to be peace in Israel? That seems to be there. But let's face it, this is not new. This is the Holy Land, but it has also historically been a place of conflict. And that's because of the sacred nature of this. In fact, let me just show this to you. If you look down at the Western Wall, which is right down here, this is the holiest spot for Jews. And this is this is where the Solomon's first temple was, 3,300 years ago. And then after that was destroyed, then it was rebuilt. The second temple came, and just a little bit around that period, the retaining wall was built, and that is the Western Wall. And as I said, this is the holiest spot for Jews to pray, as you can see them doing right now. But just behind that, you've got the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Muslims believe that this is where Prophet Muhammad ascended to the heavens from, and as a result, this is one of the most sacred spots in Islam. I think after Mecca and Medina, this would be the most sacred site for Islam. And if you go a little bit this side, if you think that fighting between the Jews and the Muslims isn't enough, remember the Crusades, remember the Christians coming to fight for the Holy Land, and that's because all of this was also very sacred for them. So the Crusaders came, the Templars came, and somewhere out here, of course, is the Christian quarter, and that's where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. This is where Jesus Christ was crucified. This is where Christians believe the body of Jesus Christ is buried there at the Church of Holy Sepulchre. So this is a very, very historic place, and because of the history and because of the fighting, it is really a place you should get to know a little bit about. And can you just bear with me for a few minutes, because the most recent fighting is not all of this. This has been happening for thousands of years. The most recent fighting, obviously, the last 70 years, has been Israel and the right of the state of Israel to exist, and Israel being set up out here, and what happened with the Arabs and the Arab state fighting with Israel, and what should be done with the Palestinian people. That's been the real subject of argument and fighting for the last 75 years or so. So let me go a little bit into giving you the quick history of that. I'm going to be walking with the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem through the streets of this entire holy city, and I'm going to be discussing some of those issues with her, including whether peace can be brought and which way could peace possibly be realized. But before I do any of that, let's just give you a potted history of what's been happening here for the last 75 years or so.
Recent history begins somewhere around the First World War. After the war ended, the British established a colony in Palestine under the League of Nations mandate. The British were allowed to rule the area until Palestine was ready for self-governance. Back in the 19th century, this region's population was around 87% Muslim, 10% Christian, and 3% Jewish. But in the years following the war, the Jewish population in Palestine began increasing, courtesy what was happening in Europe, the expelling of Jews, and the prosecution. In Palestine, the influx meant increasing tension between the Israeli and the Arab population. During the Second World War, more Jews began making their way to Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations held a vote. It divided Palestine and established separate Palestinian and Jewish states. While the Jewish leaders accepted the plan, the Arabs did not. Either way, the British left in 1948, the Jews declared independence, and Israel was created. Thus began a never-ending spate of violence. In 1948, 5 Arab states invaded Israel: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. Israel won the war. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled to Arab countries. In 1956, tensions escalated once again. Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Israel attacked the Sinai Peninsula and retook the canal. The British and the French government supported Israel, but peace was nowhere in sight. In 1967, the Six-Day War broke out. Israel fought Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Over 90% of the Egyptian Air Force was destroyed. Israel captured the Gaza Strip from Egypt, Golan Heights from Syria, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan. The last one was especially significant, because the control of East Jerusalem meant Jews could now pray at the Western Wall. In 1973, Syria and Egypt launched airstrikes in Israel. The assault began on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, lending to its name the Yom Kippur War. Who won? Israel. All this while, Israel was encouraging Jewish settlements in areas that weren't given to it under the UN resolution. In 1987, there was an uprising of Palestinians. They were angry about the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. These protests triggered the First Intifada. It came to an end in 1993 with the Oslo Peace Accords. Who were the signatories? The government of Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was formed in 1964 to fight for the liberation of Palestine. The PLO was operating from Lebanon. In 1982, the Israeli Defense Force invaded southern Lebanon to evict the PLO. Cut to the Oslo Accords. It established limited Palestinian self-rule in parts of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. In 2006, the Second Lebanon War broke out. Israel was fighting a Lebanese Shia group called Hezbollah. Also in 2006, a Sunni Islamist group, Hamas, won elections in Palestine. In the years that followed, the group fought multiple battles with Israel. In 2020, the Trump administration announced its most ambitious foreign policy project, the Abraham Accords, a plan for normalization of relations between Israel and the Arab states. In September 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain agreed to normalize ties with Israel. They were the third and fourth countries in the region to do so, following Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. But the truth is, the multiple peace accords have not really been able to solve the conflict. Tensions are still very much on the rise between Israelis and Palestinians. There's talk of a third intifada on the horizon. And what happens next is anybody's guess.